turn on to you, First Elect. I am not a finance person. I'm not very much of an economic person. But as a lay person, I keep seeing that the markets are the ones which are driving everything. Now in Europe, something happens in North Africa, the markets are affected. Yesterday, we see it because of Germany, the markets are affected. Also, somebody coming from an institution of the European Union, where we're seeing that politicians don't make so much the decisions themselves, but decisions are being driven by the markets again. So, in layman terms, you know, are the markets so much at the core of it all? And if this is so, what is the role of the Malta Stock Exchange, coming from a small country?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for the interesting question. It's nowadays actually quite difficult to separate what is the economy, what is finance, what is a political decision. It's difficult to separate those because today really one thing drives the other. So basically, if there is a political decision taken, as we have seen, every time there is a decision, there's a reflection in the market. On the other side, if the markets for some reason move because there is a failure or a success in one side, then again it has an effect also beyond politics. Certainly, markets are at the core of modern society. At the end of the day, it all comes down to money. It all comes down to the availability of finance for development. So markets play a huge role in providing that the facility for providing that cash for development, that finance, that funding. So I think the short answer is that yes, markets are at the core. To come specifically to a market like the Malta Stock Exchange, which in any terms is a micro market, what is the role of such markets? Do they have this pivotal role? I would say that yes, I would still say that they do have this pivotal role. I remember I made mention about 6-7 years ago when the MiFID directive, the Market and Financial Investments Directive, was being discussed in Europe and was being brought on stream. This directive caters for new trading venues, so trading venues that are not exchanges but are really technical venues. And at that point, the discussion was, would exchanges survive? Would these new boys on the block actually take over all the business because they were bigger, they had more technology, so they could be cheaper, they weren't time-bound by the same regulation that markets were? The truth is that exchanges did survive because they diversified. Then the discussion started focusing, well, would small exchanges survive? They can't provide the liquidity that the big markets provide. They cannot provide the mass that would enable prices to go down. The truth is that the small exchanges have survived. And if you look at the comparative figures of exchanges, you will see that the growth in the small exchanges is actually comparatively larger than that of the big exchanges. Why? Big exchanges work on volumes. They need liquidity. They need trading volume. They need sophisticated instruments. Small exchanges diversify. They can provide different users with different services. This is particularly pertinent in the discussions taking place in Europe at the moment, for example, on SMEs. Particular requirements, specific requirements for SMEs. Why going to SMEs? Because SMEs, why that focus? SMEs will find it impossible to go to the big market. So even within the discussions currently taking place in the EU, there is this knowledge, there is this acceptance that there is a diversity, that even exchanges like ours, the small exchanges, can actually provide particular services. Within our own economy, The role of the exchange, if we look over 20 years, now with a capitalization of 8.6 billion being on the exchange, one can say that yes, this is playing a huge role in the economy. It's providing that finance, it's providing that liquidity. It's not being taken from the banks, it is a different venue. So yes, it is serving an economic purpose of providing the finance for those who require it and for other investment opportunities for investors.
You've touched a very sensitive area for me, the small and medium enterprises. And you do mention that there is the scope as well. However, in reality, in the situation which we see in the Eurozone affecting the economy, and we know SMEs are the first that are hard hit, especially when they need access to finance, and also what is going on in the North African region and the whole Mediterranean. Is really the stock exchange, the stock market, in any way more attractive for SMEs? And if so, what changes should be done, possibly, to make this more accessible? Because we know that it is so difficult for an SME to have access to the stock market. There's a bureaucracy, there's high costs. It's attractive for them, but it's very difficult in practical terms. So is there a foreseeable for the future, the way, from your personal perspective, that it would be more attractive and accessible for SMEs?
Certainly, I mean, the discussion that is taking place in Europe at the moment on SMEs is actually throughout all the regulation that is coming out on the financial services. So whether you're talking about a prospectus directive, whether you're talking about a new markets and investment in financial instruments, whether you're talking about the new securities legislation. Outside all of this is the particular discussion on how can we still provide a way in for SMEs to be able to access that finance. Because as you rightly said, accessing finance on the market is not cheap. There are so many regulations, so much management changes so often that needs to be done, that it is not cheap. However, if we look at our market, by European standards, most of the companies on our market are actually SMEs, because an SME is defined as a company which is of less than 100 million cap. So, and what is driving this discussion is because, as again you rightly said, it is these small companies that are very hard hit when there is no funding or cash available from the more traditional ways of getting cash. So from banks, for example. These are the first companies that actually are very hard hit by the lack of liquidity. So the discussion that is taking place is to try and create a niche regulation, if I may call it this, whereby the requirements for SMEs to access the market are actually slightly lower, slightly lighter, but with retaining the same level of investor protection and regulation. And also, as you may be aware, in, for example, prospectus directive, there are certain limits where you can come to the market, and certain limits may be waived in the case of SMEs. And this is where the smaller exchanges actually have a role to play, because it is the smaller exchanges, and I don't only refer to our exchange, but also to our colleagues in other exchanges who are very similar to us, where they can be particularly attractive to SMEs. SMEs look for a personalized service, they look for a very fast service, they look for a flexible service as well. They do not want to be faced with faceless bureaucracy, which is very daunting, except apart from being very expensive. And this is where we are seeing the increase, certainly in business, certainly from our point of view. This is where, over the next few months, we are certainly seeing even companies that are, and this is foreign companies, are looking at Malta as a jurisdiction, and not only because of the exchange, but because of all the other services that are available within the financial sector. It's attractive, we have high regulation, but we are a very efficient jurisdiction, if I may say this, very efficient in the financial services. We can provide certainly all the requirements that are required for these SMEs. So even if it's your lawyers, your consultants, your accountants, we can provide this all, and we can do it very fast. And of course, speed is money for companies.
Thank you very much, EILEEN. I turn on to you, Bruno, from the Malta Stock Exchange to Finance Malta. But everybody knows about the Malta Stock Exchange. Maybe not everybody knows about Finance Malta, or rather we've heard about Finance Malta. We see Finance Malta coming up time and time again. What exactly is Finance Malta in a very few sentences?
I'm not going to pitch myself or the organisation for too long. But Finance Malta is essentially a public-private partnership which was set up in 2007 on the initiative of the government of Malta. So the scope is really to promote Malta as an international financial centre and to ensure that the community domestically and internationally has a clearer understanding of how Malta has evolved from its offshore heyday to now being a fully fledged European Union onshore centre. We have a board of governors, 8 in actual fact. 4 represents the government of Malta and 4 represents the main industry association. We are in fact a non-profit foundation, so we have funding from both governments. We also have a task of obtaining funding from the industry. We're a membership-based organisation, so we have over 253 members now, 200 of which represent the financial services community, which you have legal firms, accountancy firms, business advisors, corporate services firms, hedge fund managers, hedge fund administrators, and so forth. And then we have 53 affiliate members, which represents the non-financial services firms. But they are firms who are benefiting from the growth